I never thought I would be the guy whose life got turned upside down by infidelity. I mean, sure, every relationship has its ups and downs, but I always believed my marriage to Laura was solid. We'd been together for nearly a decade, and while we had our usual squabbles, I thought we were a team. You know, the kind of couple that could weather the storms together. But then I started noticing changes in her behavior. At first, it was subtle. Laura, who had always been the social butterfly, started spending more time working late or hanging out with friends. I remember brushing it off. Maybe she was just finally embracing her career. After all, she had recently taken up life coaching, and I was proud of her. Who wouldn't want their spouse to pursue their passion? But pride quickly morphed into suspicion when she came home late one Friday, smelling of cheap cologne and alcohol. Her excuse? A celebration with her colleagues. I should have known then that something was off. Things escalated one night when I stumbled across her phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter. As I grabbed it to remind her to take it upstairs, I noticed a string of messages from some guy named Mike. The way they were written, flirty, intimate, and filled with inside jokes, hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart raced as I tapped on the messages. They weren't just friends, they were clearly crossing lines. I played it cool. I didn't want to confront her right away. I needed more evidence, more clarity. So for a few days I became something of a detective, watching her every move. I noticed her change of clothes before heading out, the constant notifications from Mike's number, and the way she jumped to reply to them. It all added up to a sinking realization. My wife was cheating on me. The moment of confrontation came one Thursday night when I couldn't take it anymore. I had planned a nice dinner, hoping to rekindle some of that old spark, but all I could think about was the betrayal. So, after a couple of glasses of wine, I decided to lay it all out on the table. "Laura, who is Mike?" I asked. Her expression shifted from casual to defensive in a heartbeat. "What do you mean?" She replied, feigning innocence that felt all too rehearsed. I held up her phone, the screen illuminating her guilt like a spotlight. "Don't play games with me, I can see the messages." She tried to laugh it off, claiming they were just friends and that I was overreacting. Her words dripped with insincerity. "It's nothing, really, just coaching stuff. You're being ridiculous." But I could see the panic in her eyes. The betrayal was too fresh and raw. I felt the anger boiling inside me, a fire that threatened to consume everything I thought I knew about our life together. Tears formed in her eyes and she launched into a litany of excuses. "I'm just stressed, it's work, you don't understand." But I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I felt betrayed, and her attempt to make it about her stress felt like pouring salt on an open wound. I laid it out plainly. "You're cheating on me, Laura. This isn't okay." In that moment, I was on a roller coaster of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for believing her lies. All those years spent together, the memories we built, suddenly felt tainted. The woman I thought I loved was standing there, trapped in a web of her own deceit. As she continued to plead her case, trying to downplay the affair, I found myself fighting against a wave of despair. I could feel the pieces of our life together shattering around me. I didn't know how to process it all. My stomach twisted in knots and my heart felt heavy like a stone. I needed to step back, to breathe. I told her I needed time, that I couldn't deal with this right now. I walked out of the room, feeling like a part of me had just died. I knew I had to make a decision, but I wasn't ready. I couldn't just sit in this mess without figuring out what I truly wanted. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Something inside me had shifted, and I had to confront that change. It was time to start thinking about my next move. The hours after our confrontation felt like a surreal haze. I wandered around the house, every corner a reminder of what we had built together and now lost. I could hear the echoes of laughter, the shared dreams we once whispered in the dark, but now they felt like distant memories, overtaken by a gnawing pain in my chest. I needed to process everything, and for the first time in years I felt truly alone. As night fell, I found myself sitting in our dimly lit living room, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I replayed the events of the evening over and over in my mind, Laura's excuses echoing like a broken record. How could she do this? More importantly, how could I have been so blind? I glanced toward the kitchen where her phone lay, my evidence of her betrayal, and I felt a surge of anger. I needed answers. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I started by gathering her messages and, with a sinking feeling, realized I needed to change my strategy. I wasn't just a victim here. I had to take control of my life. I spent hours combing through Laura's social media accounts, searching for any breadcrumbs that could guide me to the truth. I found pictures of her at a bar with Mike, laughing and carefree. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. I confided in my best friend, Jake, who had been with me through every high and low. I heavily leaned on him for support, and after hearing my story, he was furious. "Dude, you can't let her get away with this. You deserve better." His anger mirrored my own, and it felt good to have someone in my corner urging me to stand up for myself. That weekend, as Laura was supposedly at a seminar, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew where she'd be, and I wanted to see it for myself. I drove to the hotel where the seminar was being held, knowing it was the perfect cover for her affair. My heart raced, and I felt a mix of dread and determination. This was a turning point. I parked a few blocks away and made my way to the entrance. As I approached the lobby, I spotted Laura and Mike sitting in a corner booth, engrossed in conversation. There they were, two people who had created this deception, right in front of me. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I watched them laugh together. My vision narrowed, and all I could think about was confronting her, but then I hesitated. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to catch her in the act without getting emotional. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few discreet pictures. I felt a surge of power in that moment. I was no longer the victim. I had proof, and I could use it however I wanted. I finally left, my heart pounding, but with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt before. I had been hurt, but I was ready to turn that pain into something constructive. I knew I had to channel this energy into rebuilding myself. It was time to make the best version of myself, not only for Laura but for me. As the days passed, I focused on self-improvement. I hit the gym hard, something I hadn't done in years. I hired a personal trainer, wanting to transform not just my body but my mind as well. I dissected my life and started to rebuild from the ground up. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned, like painting and hiking. I wanted to become someone I could be proud of, regardless of Laura's actions. It was also during this time that I started seeing a therapist. I needed to talk through my feelings and process the betrayal. During our sessions, I discovered the depth of my anger and sadness, but it also became a journey of self-discovery. I learned to set boundaries, to value myself, and most importantly, to understand that I wasn't defined by my marriage. As I grew stronger and more self-aware, I realized that I didn't want to be the guy who lived in the shadow of his cheating spouse. I wanted to move forward, whether that meant reconciling with Laura or moving on completely. Yet, despite my progress, I knew a confrontation was inevitable. Laura had no idea about my transformation, and I still had those pictures as leverage. I couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. I had to face her again, not just for closure, but to reclaim my life. I wanted to confront her with the new me, a man who was no longer going to just sit back and accept whatever she threw my way. I was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. The days turned into weeks, and I continued to pour myself into this newfound lifestyle. I transformed my body, built confidence, and even started to regain a semblance of joy. Friends began to notice the change. They complimented my energy and positivity. I felt like I was finally emerging from a fog that had clouded my mind for far too long. But with all this growth, I still grappled with the inevitable confrontation looming over me like a dark cloud. One evening, I decided it was time. Laura had come home earlier than usual, and the atmosphere felt different, tense, almost electric. I could sense she was on edge, perhaps sensing that I was no longer the same man who would accept her lies without question. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable fallout. "Laura, can we talk?" I asked, keeping my tone steady despite my racing heart. She looked up from her phone, surprise mingling with apprehension on her face. Sure. What's up?" I gestured for her to sit on the couch, and she complied, fidgeting with her hands. I could see the nervousness in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment I felt bad for her. But I quickly reminded myself of the betrayal that had brought us to this moment. I needed to be strong. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I started choosing my words carefully. About us, about everything that's happened. I watched as her expression shifted between anticipation and dread. Listen, I know you've been upset, but I love you, and I think we can work through this. She started, her voice laced with desperation. I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with half-hearted reassurances. Laura, I interjected, this isn't just about feelings. I saw you with Mike. I watched as her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. I have pictures, Laura, you can't deny it. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. I'm not interested in your excuses right now. You've betrayed me in a way that I never thought possible. You've hurt me and you've hurt us. For a moment there was silence. Laura seemed to be searching for words, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. You don't understand, she finally said, her voice breaking. I was just trying to find myself. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mike was. He was just someone I could talk to. Her words were like daggers. Were those really the excuses she thought could save her? Find yourself. By cheating, that's how you choose to find yourself. My anger flared, but I kept it in check. I was determined not to let her see me lose control. Look, I know I messed up. I've been under so much pressure with work and everything else. You can't deny that we've been distant, she pleaded. Yes, we've had our issues, I said, my voice steady. But that doesn't mean you get to disrespect our vows. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me instead of sneaking around behind my back. The floodgates opened then. I'm sorry, she sobbed, the tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know how to handle it. You were so focused on your own life and I felt ignored. It almost felt like a tactic, turning the conversation back onto me. Excuses, Laura, you chose to cheat. You didn't choose to communicate. You didn't choose to work on our problems. My heart raced as I spoke. I wasn't just confronting her. I was also confronting the pain I had felt in silence for so long. Please, let's go to therapy together. We can fix this, she urged, desperation tinging her voice. Therapy? Is that what you think will solve everything? You think one session will erase what you've done? I shook my head, feeling more resolute than ever. I don't even know if I can look at you the same way again. Her face fell in despair, and for the first time I truly saw the weight of her actions reflected in her eyes. But as much as I wanted to feel pity for her, I couldn't ignore the damage she had caused. I had transformed into a new person, someone who wasn't willing to accept betrayal as just a bump in the road. Laura, I continued, my voice softening only slightly, I have to think about what I want too. I need space to figure this out. I can't stay in a relationship that's built on lies. The tears flowed more freely now. Yuka. Just leave me, we can work on this, she cried, her voice breaking. Maybe I need to leave you to find myself, just like you were trying to do, but I'm going to do it without infidelity. I need to reclaim my life. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I spoke those words, realizing I was finally taking control of my own narrative. As I stood up to leave the room, I glanced back at her, feeling a mix of sadness and empowerment. I'll be staying at Jake's for a while. I need time to think. With that, I turned and walked away, feeling like I had finally taken a step toward healing, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long journey toward understanding and reclaiming my life. Staying at Jake's place turned into both a refuge and a revelation. The first few nights were rough, filled with restless sleep and endless thoughts circling in my mind. I couldn't shake the images of Laura and Mike, the laughter they shared, and the intimacy they had built while I was left. In the dark, each time I closed my eyes, I felt the betrayal wash over me again, but in this new space, I had the freedom to process it without the constant reminders of our life together. Jake was supportive, always encouraging me to let it out. Man, you need to be mad. You need to feel this rage, it's healthy. He told me as we played video games one evening. It felt good to distract myself, but I also needed to confront my feelings rather than bury them under distractions. I wasn't one to dwell long, but I understood this was part of the healing process. The more I talked about what had happened, the more clarity I gained. I realized I wasn't just angry at Laura, I was angry at myself. I had let my own life slip into a routine where we had stopped connecting. Yet I also understood that her choice to cheat was solely on her. That realization was a turning point. I had to stop blaming myself for her actions. Gradually, I began to see how I could move forward. I started drafting a plan for my own life, what I wanted and who I wanted to become. I set goals, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. I signed up for classes at a local community center, tackling subjects I had always been interested in but never pursued. I signed up for a cooking class, an art workshop. I even began volunteering at a local shelter. I wanted to immerse myself in new experiences and build a life that was entirely my own. After a couple of weeks, I finally reached a point where I felt ready to revisit the conversation with Laura. I didn't know what I would say, but I was sure of one thing. I needed to speak to her on my terms. I called her and suggested we meet at a park. It felt neutral, a place where we could talk without the weight of our shared home hanging over us. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. I walked through the park, taking in the fresh air, trying to calm my nerves. I spotted Laura on a bench, looking more vulnerable than I had seen her in a long time. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes were red, whether from tears or lack of sleep I couldn't tell. As I approached her, I saw the tension in her shoulders. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "Hey," she replied, her voice small. We exchanged awkward pleasantries, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken emotions. I took a deep breath, ready to lay it all out. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, Laura, about us, about what happened. I want to understand why it happened." She nodded, the tension in her body still palpable. "I know I messed up. I never meant for it to get to that point." "Never meant to?" I challenged, my voice firm but calm. "You made a choice. Multiple choices, actually. You chose to engage with Mike, to lie to me, to hide it from me. I need you to understand the gravity of that." "I do, I really do," she exclaimed, her voice rising slightly. I didn't know how to communicate my feelings. I felt like I was losing myself in our relationship, and I was scared. "So instead of coming to me, you decided to find comfort in someone else," I countered. "That's not a solution, Laura. That's running away." "I know, and I'm so sorry," she replied, tears brimming in her eyes again. "I realize now that I hurt you beyond comprehension. I've been in therapy trying to figure out what I did wrong. I'll do anything to make this right." I took a moment to reflect on her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, the other part screamed at me to remember the pain. "I appreciate that you're trying to understand, but it's going to take more than words to fix this. Trust is broken and it's not easy to rebuild." "I understand. I really do," she said earnestly. "I just want a chance to prove that I can be better for you, for us." At that moment, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I wanted to hold on to the memories, the love we had shared, but on the other, I was acutely aware of the betrayal that lay between us like a chasm. "I need to be honest with you, Laura. I don't know if I can forgive you right now. I'm still processing everything." Her face fell, disappointment washing over her features. "I get it. I just wish I could go back and make different choices. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I replied, softening slightly. "But right now, we need to focus on ourselves. I've been working on becoming a better version of myself, and I want to continue on that path. I can't promise I'll be ready to work on us anytime soon." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our conversation heavy in the air. I could see her struggling with the reality of what she had done, and it didn't bring me as much satisfaction as I thought it would. I wanted her to regret her choices, but more than that, I wanted to move forward with or without her. Finally, I stood up, breaking the tension. "I think we should take some time apart. I need to focus on myself and figure out what I truly want. You're going to need to do the same." "Okay," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I could see acceptance in her eyes, but it hurt to see the pain I had caused. "Take care of yourself, Laura," I said, turning to leave. As I walked away, I felt a sense of finality, a step toward reclaiming my life. I didn't know where this path would take me, but I was ready to face the unknown, to embrace the journey ahead, no matter how difficult it might be. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. After leaving that park, I focused entirely on myself. I immersed myself in work, friendships, and new activities. I learned how to cook a few meals that actually tasted decent, and I even surprised myself with how much I enjoyed painting. The world felt different, alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Jake kept pushing me to explore my options, dating, meeting new people, enjoying life outside of my past with Laura. "You've got to get back out there, man," he'd say, nudging me towards social gatherings. "You're a good catch. Don't let one bad experience ruin your future." At first, I was hesitant. I was still processing the hurt and betrayal. However, I also realized that life was too short to wallow in sadness. Eventually, I agreed to join him and a few friends at a local bar one Friday night. It was a little nerve-wracking, standing there amidst laughter and chatter, but I was also excited to be surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. As the night unfolded, I found myself laughing and engaging with old friends. I met a woman named Emily, a vibrant, energetic person who radiated positivity. We clicked immediately over our shared love for travel and art. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to her. We spent hours chatting, and for the first time since everything happened with Laura, I felt a spark of attraction. Emily and I exchanged numbers, and to my surprise, she texted me the next day. We began talking more frequently, exploring art galleries and even sharing a few meals. I felt alive again, but I was cautious. I didn't want to rush into anything, especially given my recent heartbreak. Yet Emily was kind and understanding, never pushing me to move faster than I was comfortable. As I began to rebuild my life, I kept reflecting on my past with Laura. I had moments of sadness, certainly, but they were punctuated by the realization that I deserved happiness and fulfillment. Outside of that tumultuous relationship, I was creating a new identity for myself, one that was free from betrayal. One evening, just as I was starting to feel optimistic about my future, I received a call from Laura. I hadn't spoken to her since our conversation in the park. My heart raced at the thought of hearing her voice again. I answered cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Hey," she began, sounding somewhat uncertain. "I know it's been a while. I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed." "Yeah," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I've been working on myself, really trying to understand my mistakes and why I strayed. I've even started seeing a relationship counselor." I listened, feeling a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Part of me wanted to hear her out to see if she had genuinely changed. "That's good, I guess," I said, not wanting to give too much away. "I know I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry for that. I've realized how much I took for granted. I still love you, and I want to make things right." Her voice was earnest, and I could sense she was fighting back tears. "I appreciate that you're trying to work on yourself, Laura," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But it's going to take more than just apologies. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. You really hurt me." "I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me right now," she rushed to say. "I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to making changes in my life. I miss you, and I think we can work through this if you're open to it." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. It was almost tempting to consider rekindling things, to slip back into the comfort of our old life. But I also remembered the pain of betrayal, the sleepless nights, the heartbreak. "I need to continue focusing on myself, Laura. I'm not ready to jump back into anything right now," I replied, my tone steady but gentle. "I understand. I just wanted to reach out and let you know where I'm at. I hope we can talk again soon. I want to show you that I'm serious about making things right." After hanging up, I felt conflicted. Part of me felt guilty for not instantly accepting her apologies, but another part of me knew that I was on the right path. I had to prioritize my healing, my growth, and I wasn't willing to compromise that just yet. A few days later, I met up with Emily for dinner. As we talked and laughed, I realized I felt genuinely happy. I was beginning to let the past go, to forge a new path forward. Emily brought out a side of me I had forgotten existed, one that was playful, curious, and excited about life. It was refreshing. As I continued to explore this new connection, I felt like I was rediscovering myself. I was learning that I didn't need to tether my happiness to someone else. I was becoming whole on my own, and that was empowering. But the calls from Laura kept coming, mixed with texts and messages filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. I read them but didn't respond immediately. I needed time to weigh my options. Could I even consider a future with her after everything that had happened? The reality was that I had built a life without her, and it felt good. I wasn't sure if I wanted to let that go just yet. As I continued to navigate this delicate balance between moving on and facing the past, I knew I had to make a decision soon. Would I return to the comfort of what I once knew or continue forging ahead into the unknown? The choice weighed heavily on my mind, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the man who would accept betrayal without question. I would choose my path, and I would do it on my terms. With each passing day, the pressure to make a decision loomed larger. I found myself caught in the middle of two lives, the one I had built with Laura, filled with memories now stained by betrayal, and the promising new experience I was beginning to cultivate with Emily. Both options had their allure and their consequences, but I knew I couldn't waver forever. One afternoon, while I was at the gym, I received another message from Laura. This time, it was different. She had written about how she had spent time reflecting on her actions and had come to understand the depth of her mistakes. She expressed her desire to take responsibility not only for her actions but also for the hurt she had caused. It was a sincere message, and for the first time I felt a glimmer of hope that she was genuinely working on herself. That evening, I sat in my apartment, contemplating everything. I thought about how far I had come since the betrayal. I was no longer the man who allowed himself to be sidelined. I was choosing my own path, one that could potentially lead to happiness. I recalled the warmth of Emily's laughter and how easy it felt to be around her. Yet, there was a part of me that still held onto the history I had with Laura. The memories we shared were still vivid in my mind, the love we once had was real, and it hurt to think about how drastically things had changed. But could I really trust her again? And if I went back, what would it mean for my newfound sense of self? I decided to meet with Laura one last time to discuss where everything stood. I wanted to hear her out, to gauge whether her words were genuine and if there was a possibility of rebuilding what we once had. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in town. As I walked in, I could see her sitting at a small table, nervously twisting her hands. There was a vulnerability in her expression that hadn't been there during our previous conversations. "Hi," I said as I took a seat across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice slightly shaky. We exchanged small talk, but the air was thick with anticipation. I finally cut through the pleasantries. "So, how have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my tone open. "I've been working hard on my therapy and trying to understand my behavior. I've realized so much about myself," she began, her eyes earnest. "I've made a lot of mistakes and I know that I hurt you deeply. I'm sorry for everything." Her vulnerability was palpable, and for the first time I felt I could see the real Laura. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I need you to understand that rebuilding trust takes time, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "I understand," she responded, her voice steady. "I just want to be given a chance to show you that I can be better. I've realized how much I took for granted and I can't change the past, but I want to prove to you that I'm committed to being a better partner. I miss the life we had together." As I listened to her, I thought about the journey I'd taken since our separation. I had rediscovered joy in my life, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't the same person who would just forgive and forget. I had learned to value myself and had begun to envision a future independent of our past. "Laura, I can't deny that I was hurt and I'm still processing everything that happened," I replied. "I've found a sense of fulfillment on my own, and while I'm open to hearing you out, I can't promise anything. I need to prioritize my own journey right now." She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "I get it. I just hope that, in time, we can see where things might lead. I'll be here, working on myself regardless of what happens between us." As we continued to talk, I began to feel a sense of closure settling in. I recognized that while I could appreciate her growth, I wasn't obligated to return to the life we once had. I had a choice, and that choice was mine to make. When we finished our conversation, I left the coffee shop feeling lighter. I knew I didn't want to rush back into something that could potentially hurt me again. I was ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me, and I felt a powerful sense of independence. In the weeks that followed, I continued to nurture my relationship with Emily. It was refreshing to be with someone who was excited about life, who shared my interests but also challenged me in ways I hadn't expected. I was slowly learning to love again, and it felt exhilarating. I also kept in touch with Laura, but the tone of our interactions shifted. Instead of longing for what we had, it felt more respectful, almost friendly. She continued to work on herself, and I could see her growth, but I was now determined to carve my own path moving forward. Ultimately, I learned that healing isn't linear. It's a process filled with ups and downs. I had faced pain and betrayal, but I had also found strength and self-worth. I was becoming the best version of myself, not just for someone else, but for me. And while the future remained uncertain, I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. I had learned to trust myself, and that gave me the courage to face whatever lay ahead, open to new possibilities and experiences, unafraid to pursue happiness.